What is poppin'? It is the Slapped, and I am but a lowly Slapped riding these DeFi waves. And I have a very special video and guest with me today, a co-host, if you will, none other than the man with the plan, the man without a tan, the Estonian madman, Rez. Rez, thank you. Wait,
Hello.
let's clap.
Yay, me. I'm here. I'm doing such an important job by existing.
Rez and I regularly talk about ReFi and politics and everything, and sometimes we get angry with each other and we yell at each other, and it's always fun. And we thought, hey, let's record this because, well, Rez, what's your background? Why don't you give people your background?
Oh man. I'm a computer scientist turned data scientist turned product manager turned protocol person now.
And you are
So
very knowledgeable in ReFi, aren't you?
I guess people would say that.
Yeah.
I hope I am. Though, there's always someone smarter than you. So, yeah.
Except for you, because you're the smartest. And you've been involved in a number of protocols, right? Like a number of ReFi protocols as a consultant or doing something. So you're very tapped into the space.
Sure.
Yeah. So I figured this is usually the conversations we go, and I'd ask you questions and you'd answer them. I said, well, other people should have these sorts or be privy to these conversations because that's how I learn. Maybe other people would want to learn too. So this is going to be called This Week in ReFi, and the goal of this is going to be to educate people on regenerative finance, and with an emphasis on economics and blockchain, right, and green projects, the intersection of those three things. So we're going to cover stories, both macro stories, and we're going to give you updates on particular DAOs in the ReFi space. And then you can big brain us all, Rez. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, man. So we curated a bunch of stories. The first of which is going to be the PCU.
Boy.
Give us a rundown, man. What do we got for the PCU?
Okay, so the PCU, also known as the procrastinated carbon unit or projected carbon unit, is something that Vera is planning to implement in the future. They laid out even a timeline of when we're looking to do this, and as we know, software development is very predictable, so I'm sure we'll see it exactly on time. In terms of what this actually is, PCUs are a new primitive that Vera is working on in order to reflect the rights to future issuance. So Vera would like to natively support carbon projects selling off the rights to the... they would like to sell off the rights to issue credits under a project in the future. So that would mean, let's say you're a afforestation, reforestation project, you're looking to get credits in 5 years, you need to finance that somehow. Generally, you already can do like some form of forward deals, but this just is that extra topping on the whole deal of having in the registry like something that automatically will give you the credits once the issuance happens. So that's super cool because that removes one part of delivery risk, which is you work with a project developer, they go through all of the steps, you already paid them, then they get certified, and then they don't take your calls anymore and sell the credits off to other people. So that can happen. This kind of a structure avoids that happening, which is really cool.
So I always think of this as like, you go out into the dating world, right? You go on maybe Tinder or whatever, maybe whatever you're on, and you meet a significant other, in my case, a young lady, and she gives you a phone number, and you think you have a deal that you're going to meet with her, and then she rugs you. She never calls you back. Is that? And so this would, in some way, eliminate that, right? This would be like an assurance that she's going to call you back, that the project will call you back.
Yeah, this is rug proofing. So if the project actually does manage to deliver, you're definitely in on the issuance.
There you go. And so a lot of people don't know this, and I actually learned this from you, is how Vera, which is the verifying body, actually goes about approving and issuing carbon credits. It's two separate things, right? And I don't think people know this. So, and you could tell me if I'm off base in this, but basically Vera will go and they'll say to a project, let's say a forest or reforestation project, like, you've met our standards and we believe that in the lifetime of your project that you would be eligible for, let's say, 100,000 VCUs. That's the approval process, correct? Or is that the... Okay.
It's actually even more complicated than that.
Is that a simple way to put it? Like, what's...
No,
Okay. Or is it just wrong?
It's kind of wrong. So,
Okay, go ahead.
like, to put it simply, Vera doesn't actually like tell people how many credits they can issue. There is a whole cottage industry and process around getting to certification. So step one for a carbon project would likely be getting their shit together, and step two would be getting themselves registered on the Vera registry as a project in the pipeline. This is actually already you interacting with a third party who is going over your documents and checking that, hey, yep, this is legitimate. And then they tell Vera, and then Vera gives you a registration. Okay. And so then you're just registered. You don't get credits. Like, it's just, there is a possibility for you to get credits down the line. Then you work with this third party who is Vera approved. And then at some point down the line, this third party called a VVB or Validation Verification Body lets Vera know that, hey, I've checked all of the documents. Here are all of the documents. This project can now issue this many credits. And then the project can then turn to Vera and go like, okay, actually give me the credits now.
Right. So there is a disconnect between getting on the registry, getting the check boxes, and actually getting the issuance of credits. And so this would be the bridge gap between those two things, right? So you need funding, but you don't have credits yet. So you have to do a fundraising round, presumably, if you're not, have crazy money. And so this would be a way to assure the purchasers of future credits that you will deliver them.
Yes, but I don't think it has contingencies of what happens if a project fails. Obviously, then it just doesn't issue, right? But it just removes this like one part of the risk equation, which is a project creating credits but not sending them to you.
Yeah, makes sense. And so, as we mentioned, like this seems to have a natural fit with afforestation and reforestation, which has, would you say, compared to other carbon credits, like a big lag time from initiation to issuance?
It's mostly that all nature-based methodologies have a much longer timeline of actually receiving certified credits. Right. Afforestation, reforestation, there's this additional problem there that the majority of the credits that you're getting are 10 years down the line. You don't actually create that many credits even in the first 5 years. So, the sapling growing isn't going to do much compared to a huge tree, growing.
And it's the nature of the nature-based token that you, you can't speed it up. I mean, you and I could sit there as reforestation people and yell at these things to grow faster, but there's no hacking the time aspect of this.
I guess there's some genetic engineering that I've read about. Seems promising, potentially. I'm unsure of what the ecological impacts of pursuing this might be. But yeah, trees grow at their own pace. There are limits to what nature can do. There's especially limits to what we can do without gene splicing or doing something very sciencey and exciting.
So this is good. This could essentially drive more demand and more confidence towards these sorts of projects, which is something we're looking to see. So is
100%.
Yeah. Is this happening? Has this happened? Where are we at?
What do you mean?
Like the PCUs is there a time frame for when this gets released? Is it released?
It's not released. What we're looking at on the screen right now is a public consultation. Okay. So Vera has this process of asking people for their opinion prior to doing anything. So in this system, they issue a bunch of ideas and then expect people to write back and give them feedback on what exactly they should do, what are the problems, feedback round essentially. Okay. But they did at the bottom of this page provide a timeline for when they would like this to be out. And I think it was later this year. I might be wrong. Okay, let's see. Consultation, PCU, which Vera anticipates launching in the fall of 2022. That's under the public consultation documents part you can see there. Okay. So final design and implementation of the PCU, fall 2022. Very exciting.
Very exciting. Cool. We will keep you abreast of this as developments unfold, of course. And the next bit that you brought to my attention was this, and please explain this because it's above my head, to be perfectly honest with you.
Cool. So when we're talking about voluntary carbon credits, they're all priced very differently. So even when we're talking about nature-based carbon credits in the Vera registry, for example, RED Plus projects, which are conservation projects protecting the Amazon, for instance, these are priced very differently from reforestation projects for many reasons, but it's mainly the additionality around what's happening, the unit economics. So, protecting a forest is a lot cheaper, but it might not have very direct additionality sometimes. While for reforestation, those are costs. You're paying the costs and you're getting credits in return. But there's this interesting middle ground, which is improved forest management of where you already have a forest, but you'd like to actively interfere in order to make the forest better. Generally, these credits are actually even a bit cheaper sometimes than RED Plus credits, which is quite surprising, I think, for many people. But IFM, generally, improved forest management, is considered a avoidance nature-based credit and not a removal nature-based credit. So the additionality you're creating is that some emissions aren't going to be released instead of some emissions are going to be captured. So I hope that you notice the difference there.
I think I understand. So just so people like this, we get into this whole world of language. It's so what's additionality? What does that mean? Could we explain that?
Well, additionality in carbon credits is a very important property, which is the act of giving you these carbon credits actually leading to the outcome, or is it other things? So if I paid you today to not drive your car, but you don't even own a car, that's not very additional. You know what I mean? There needs to be this very reasonable, logical alternative to how you would have behaved in the absence of this additional incentive.
So can I, the example I always think of is country wants to build a power plant. They're going to build a coal power plant because it's cheaper and they have, let's say they're in West Virginia, there's a lot of coal. And then they said, well, if we had these credits, we would build a hydro. And so that would be an additionality. But if they were intending to build the hydro plant anyway, they could not claim, therefore, that the credits would create additionality for them.
Yeah, exactly. And this is very important. The reason why this is very important, how do I put this? So, yeah, okay. So this is very important, but the reason why this is very important is so when these companies that actually use these credits and say hey, I'm carbon neutral, there needs to be some activity somewhere else offsetting them. If the credits we're using aren't additional, then that other activity in reality might not be happening. So in this situation of I paid you not to drive your car and I'm going to claim these benefits, but if you don't own a car, I still paid you. It's just there was no real change in the world.
Mm-hmm. Right. So in terms of IMF or IFM rather, the forest management, what would be the methods to make an impact in terms of carbon? What does that actually mean? What are we looking at?
I wish I knew.
Okay. It's something that we can definitely research. But it's just, I guess it would make sense that maybe you could do some level of species introduction, I'm assuming, right? Or, something like that. Maybe that would make the forest more carbon positive.
Could be. I honestly haven't looked that deep into it. But here's the cool thing. So the cool thing of IFM removals is that they're priced higher. So because they're removals, they're not avoidance. So I'd really love to see more of this kind of activity happening in the future, which is figuring out methodologies under which we can actually remove stuff from the atmosphere instead of just avoiding releasing more. And I think this was in the American Carbon Registry. I'm hoping we'll see something similar moving forwards, also in Gold Standard and Vera.
There you go. So world's first distinguished removal credits from forest carbon portfolio. Blue sourced element markers. All this will be in the description of the video, all the links. You guys can check all of this out. All right, very cool. All right, so now let's get a little bit into the crypto space. And we're going to be talking about none other than Flow. I struggle with their name. Flow Carbon, right? Flow DAO. Flow.
I think their DAO is called something else. It's like Goddess DAO?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. There's a lot of names. So I think the people that would be familiar with the Goddess Nature token, correct? That's their product. And my understanding is that that is a live token. They use a special investment vehicle, I think it's called. Essentially, you have a VCU or a Vera, that's Vera carbon unit. I believe that's what it's called. Locked in like essentially escrow. So when you bring it on chain, it's an escrow. The credit itself is not technically retired in any way. It's live. And then when you have the tokenized version of this VCU that's locked in escrow and you want to bring it back to chain, you just burn the token and unlock the VCU. And so you actually have what's called a live credit, right? Is that would you agree with that characterization, Rez?
Well, I don't think necessarily if we're talking about Toucan's way of retiring an off-chain credit to create an on-chain credit. When we're talking about live credits, I'm unsure if that's like the correct term.
Okay.
The correct term, I think, would more be that this is still like a Vera credit, 100%.
Right.
It's still a Vera credit.
Right.
Because what you're doing in the Toucan situation is you're kind of like moving registries. While in this situation, it's just a tokenized representation of something that already is in like Vera's registry.
Right. Okay. So anyway, it's a they're trying to make it so the integration of Vera and the blockchain credit is more seamless. I think maybe that's like the high level way to think about it, right? So there isn't this. They're trying to bridge the gap of the disconnect of an off-chain and on-chain credit. Okay, so we have this news: partners with the first carbon negative blockchain Celo to develop open on-chain carbon market infrastructure. And the details of this would be that I believe Celo purchased $10 million of Goddess Nature token, which is currently in pre-sale. And what do you know about Celo? What do you know about the Celo blockchain?
Celo is a layer 1, meaning it doesn't derive its security directly from another blockchain. Polygon, the blockchain I think a lot of us are the most familiar with, is a sidechain that backs up snapshots of itself into Ethereum. So it's not a native layer 1 in that sense. But Celo, completely its own thing, secured through its own mechanisms. It's a proof of stake blockchain, and they've been in the carbon offsetting scene for quite a while. So very early on, I think like maybe 2 years ago, something like this, they already started offsetting their emissions via this organization called REN. So at this point, they are carbon negative because the amount of money that they've spent on offsets through this partner is more than the Celo blockchain's carbon footprint. Okay,
there you go. And so I know Celo is right now really focused on bringing protocols on chain that are involved in the regenerative finance. Like they're aggressively recruiting them, and this is an example of that, right? They're giving capital, they're catalyzing, they're investing in protocols. So this is, this, in my humble opinion, this is great news for regenerative finance in general. I know that some people want regenerative finance to stay mostly on Polygon, not to fracture liquidity, and I think that's a reasonable perspective. At the same time, I think any investment into this is good investment. What are your thoughts on that, Rez? Do you think that fractured liquidity is a problem, or do you think that this is the competition and money in general is a good thing?
Money in general is a good thing, obviously. Though fractured liquidity is an interesting problem. I think long term we'll see solutions pop up for that as well. So there are already some. There are some automated market makers, like Uniswap or SushiSwap, stuff like this, but that in the background actually do cross-chain. So what this means is they are able to move the tokens over to different blockchains very efficiently. So I think this might be a solution over there. One of the major ones, I think, is Elk Finance. I think there's a few more. But I think this is like a really good way of potentially solving the cross-chain liquidity problem. And I do think the future is multi-chain in terms of I don't think we're going to settle on just having everything in one blockchain. I think there are like advantages to being more distributed, even in terms of infrastructure, though it does include a few more risks that otherwise would not be there. So if you worked with Elk Finance, and I guess if Elk Finance got hacked, that might have implications for you as well, because they're issuing like token representations of your stuff on other chains.
Right. No, I happen to agree. I think in the short term, you can make an argument that fractured liquidity is an issue. I think we all understand that the only way that these blockchains are going to work, like DLT, decentralized ledger technology, is going to work if we have a level of interoperability that's going to be seamless and convenient.
Definitely.
Right? So,
and I think here we're going to see a lot of interoperability, especially because Celo is a blockchain that supports the EVM or Ethereum virtual machine. So anything you could run on Polygon, you can also run on Celo.
Right. Okay, cool. So this is big news. I think it's cool. $10 million investment in Goddess Nature token. Speaking of Flow, we also have another purchase, $4 million of Flow Carbon's GNT token from Fifth Wall Climate Tech. You and I were researching the Fifth Wall prior to shooting this, and we were, I think, having a fun time trying to figure out what they do. But I think what we realized is, well, it's at the very bottom. They are a B Corp, which is just a corporate structure that focuses on technology for the global real estate industry. What you and I assumed, and again, we don't know exactly what we're talking about here, is that, that might fall under the umbrella of offering solutions to building owners to offset their carbon footprints, because I believe one of the largest sources of carbon right now is actually buildings. If you think about the heating of buildings alone, or the air conditioning of buildings, and then everything else associated with buildings, there's a big carbon footprint. I think New York was flirting with the idea of essentially having a carbon tax on building owners. Might this be a way, this is speculation, of the Fifth Wall getting in early to offer a solution to these building owners?
It seems so, and I'm super excited. I mean, more organizations getting involved in the voluntary carbon market, I think, should always be very welcome. We need to grow the space. We need to grow it hard. So having more incentive-aligned people in the space is great.
There you go.
I think you're right in terms of carbon offsetting is a super important thing. Also for buildings, because that can create an additional incentive to improve the energy efficiency of your building. So if you're leaking a lot of heat in winter, it's a very bad thing. So having that additional incentive of, hey, you would have to offset this otherwise, I think this can spur more investments into the kind of things that would reduce the building's carbon footprint.
There you go, man. Now, I am a real estate investor myself, so I purchase houses, fix them up, rent them, sell them. And if I rent them, if I'm going to hold them long term, from a financial perspective, it makes sense for me to insulate them properly for exactly the reason that you stated, right? So when we start getting to the point where being green is actually financially and like beneficial to you, I that's the whole game here. And so, yeah, good to see this sort of investment. So
yeah, I love it. In Europe currently, because of the expectation that the central bank is going to start offering better loan conditions for banks that have a good green portfolio. I'm unsure if this is already happening. I think this is still in the works. Banks are looking already at the idea of providing lower interest rates to people that they're looking. Sorry, I'll figure out what I wanted to say. So banks are looking at the option of giving lower interest rates on mortgages for buildings with better energy efficiency rating. So you can get better terms for a building that is better environmentally.
Yeah. Those financial incentives, I think, are going to be massive. The more we get of people are driven by money. Maybe you and I aren't. I know that you aren't. I'm more than you, but most people want money. So, all right. Another cool thing that's going on is this feature launch of retirement certificates from Toucan, as you would say, the OG carbon bridge to the blockchain. And so, what would you say about this? How would you explain this?
So we need retirement certificates because they work as a very nice, easily readable proof that offsetting happened. Toucan has allowed offsetting with, their carbon infrastructure for a while, but there hasn't been this good documentation happening that you could send to another person to prove that you did something. So what retirement certificates are a more human readable, easier to understand object that proves that you did offsetting. And it has this nice side benefit of being an NFT. So you can have a fancy NFT that tells you how many carbon credits you used.
Perfect. And you can essentially, we have a way to prove it, right? We have a better, or nice public system of account, and you can flex on fools because now you can show people how carbon negative or neutral you are, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what it's about.
Get those green NFTs.
There you go. Speaking of Toucan, they also have the honor, the distinguished place in IETA's business group, right? Mm-hmm. And so IETA is a International Emissions Trading Association. They set standards and things of that nature, right? In carbon credits.
They give very good public opinions on how things should look like.
Yeah.
So they're a policy setting organization. Cool. It's very cool.
And so for Toucan to be a part of this, I think it's good for Toucan, number one. And then I think it's just good for the space because
it is.
IETA is a TradFi, or has been a TradFi association. And now these blockchain bridges are coming aboard. Shows acceptance, legitimacy, and what influence might Toucan be able to exert on this body, right? Just by being in it. So very cool stuff. And we were joking before about how these Carbon Pulse articles, they don't mention Toucan because they want you to pay. A carbon bridge, who could that be? It's Toucan, but we'll leave a link to this. If you have the subscription, you can check it out. All right, then we move on to Moss, another bridge. And what Moss has been up to is they've been fractionalizing ownership of rainforest in Brazil. So they take a plot of land and they fractionalize it, and you can purchase an NFT, which is equal to 1 hectare of forest. For those living in the United States, that's approximately 1 football field. We don't deal with the metric system, let alone hectares. I don't know if you do in Estonia. I'm assuming you do. I'm sure you do. And so this is a cool thing. This has been going on for a while. This is their 3rd series, and they're also going to give a 1,000 Moss governance tokens, which is worth about $600 USD at the time of shooting of this video. Do you have any thoughts on this, Rez? I've never asked you about the NFT series from Moss.
I think NFTs are a really fascinating way to do fundraising for ecological objectives. So I think that's pretty cool. I have maybe some worries about the legal status over here. I think real estate backed NFTs might be potentially very security alike. But other than that, I am super enthusiastic about just seeing more NFT projects with these kind of green objectives. Because there's like this huge hype around NFTs. I mean, there's a great opportunity of getting in on the hype while still doing really good things for the planet. I think that's a great mission. And, if you can have something that looks cool and allows you to flex on fellow degens, that is excellent.
That's what it's about, baby. I'm about to flex. No, the thing with the security is, I mean, it's everything in this space, unfortunately, right now. Like, it's not just in ReFi, but it certainly does apply to ReFi. Is when we get regulatory clarity, I think you're going to see just an explosion of growth, adoption, etc. And it's just a matter of time, man. They can't ignore us forever. You know what I mean? The regulators can't ignore us forever.
The they.
Yeah, the royal they. Yeah. So
yes, the regulators.
The regulators.
Somewhere.
Somewhere. Moss is cool. Luis Adame, who's the founder, I'm a big fan of him personally. The man knows how to shitpost, pardon my language, and I mean that with the highest compliment. That man can out shitpost even me, and I'm a shitposter. Let me tell you that.
Good shitposter.
But also a savvy businessman and doing good for the planet. So, all right. Now we're going to get a little bit more TradFi stuff. So this absolutely applies. Everything in TradFi is connected to everything in DeFi. Whether the people in DeFi want to admit it or not, we're still living in a TradFi world. We're just trying to eat their lunch, and we will. But before we do that, we have to pay attention to what's happening in TradFi. And so this is a really cool thing that you and I were discussing. SAP, you knew who they were immediately. You were tapped into who they are. And they have a very big market share of enterprise resource planning, which is a fancy term for communication amongst entities of a business, right? You can just think of it as overall business accounting and services. Like it gets, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's like ERP. Those are like really old school concepts, but it's like it's a service that tries to do everything and tries to be a business platform for your entire business data. So ERP, that's like a huge thing. And SAP is the biggest ERP platform in the world.
Right. So this article mentions how, this is Yahoo Finance, mentions how SAP is now shifting their focus to regenerative frameworks and business models. And they are getting into what's called extended producer responsibility, because they see that the shift in consumer sentiment and preferences is towards companies that are responsible not just with their product, but what happens after their product vanishes, essentially, or is recycled or thrown away, right? So I think the clearest example of this is you might go to the store, see some really good I don't know, some cereal or something like that. And sure, it was sourced, let's say, environmentally consciously and humanely. But what is it in? It's in a freaking cardboard box that also has a layer of plastic in it that will inevitably end up in a landfill somewhere if it's not burned. And that plastic will sit there and biodegrade for millennia, right? So this is the entire life cycle of a product that they are now shifting their focus to. What does this say about the world and regenerative finance to you, Sir Rez?
Bullish as fuck.
Get it now. It's still early.
Get it while it's hot.
Yeah.
It's cool, and I really appreciate that our culture in the world in general is just moving towards realizing that the things we do have consequences both upstream and downstream. So recyclable packaging might be one of them, but maybe also not sourcing your t-shirts from a sweatshop might be the second part of that equation. I
agree with you. I agree. If you're gonna get your t-shirts, don't do that.
No, please don't. But generally, it's just so hard to be a mindful consumer because you don't even know the kind of fucked up shit is happening in the background in order to give you your stuff that you very much enjoy. Yeah. And I think companies taking more responsibility over what happens in the upstream and downstream is super important. And I'm very excited about people moving into this space.
Yeah. So it sounds like what SAP is essentially going to be doing is providing a product or a platform in which companies can see their downstream and upstream. They can visualize it. I think it's going to be in the cloud. Everything's in the cloud. It's going to be responsible design and production solution platform. So, hey man, like if this is the way that the world's going, regenerative finance might not be a bad place to be if you're looking to change the world or make a buck, one or the other, or both. And both are fine.
Both. Why not both?
Yeah, why not both?
Make money, do good things.
Make money, do good things.
Yes, and then spend the money you just made by doing good things to make other good things happen.
There you go.
It's very cyclical.
So that would be a good thing. This is I thought this was very interesting. This is an NPR article about Texas, the great state of Texas, Lone Star Republic. Yes, sir. I've been there. I've flown through it. I've driven through it. I like Texas. I like the people from Texas. And this just goes to show some of the obstacles of regenerative finance. And that's the fact that Texas gets a lot of its money from fossil fuels. It has oil, as they'd say. It's got some oil. And they are boycotting the investment of state funds, retirement funds, pension funds, into any company that boycotts fossil fuels. And that is a big label. So if you're a company that offers any products that are greener in nature, Texas will not invest in you. And so what I think this shows is the resistance that regenerative finance is going to have. But you and I were also talking about this previously, that there is an opportunity here. Do you remember what we were saying about that? What the opportunity could be?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, what if? So the problem right now is all the entrenched money is in fossil fuels. So they're not going to give it up. They're not going to give up their market share. And honestly, I don't blame them. That's life. They're feeding their families too. Even though it's destroying the planet, they're not thinking that far. It's like, hey, I got to live. But what if we get the regenerative finance pipeline, businesses, jobs entrenched? Then that would be the thing that would have to be overcome, essentially, right? So once you flip it and we get a significant portion of energy production out of renewables, then that will be the status quo that will be defending, let's say, the incursion of fossil fuels. So
yeah, exactly.
That's the way I was
That's
thinking.
the dream. That's the dream. And I think it's very realistic. I think oil is generally on its way out, so you might divest from it for purely economic reasons as well. Yeah. Why wouldn't you? Yeah. I think this is very backwards in terms of what we're doing, instead of spending more money to make sure that they can transition into the next era of the energy economy properly. I don't see what this really gives them other than just potentially some political clout.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's really what it was, and I think it was probably a plea for attention and all that stuff. But I think you're right.
Good old American lobbying. I'm sure the oil lobby was behind this.
You don't have that in Estonia, right?
No, I don't think we have a lot of lobbies. It's too small of a country. But on a European Union level, I'm sure there's a lot of lobbying happening from a lot of parties.
Where there's money, there's lobbying. And speaking of the European Union, that's a segue. That was professional. We have from The Guardian an article that says that the UK, or a member of the UK government, wants to issue green bonds, which would essentially be a fundraise. You're going to ask people to invest, buy these bonds that will be put into regenerative solutions, and then you get paid back your principal plus interest over time. But the interesting thing was that they would tie the rate of payback to the success of the projects. So if they had a target to have 60% renewable energy by a certain year, and they didn't hit that goal, as an investor, you would get paid back more because they broke their promise to you. I think this is nuts, but also crazy. What do you like? Yes. Like
let your money work for you. Make it happen. Let's go.
Yeah.
I think a lot of millennials, and I hope this goes through multiple other generations as well. But we generally like to spend our money in places where it earns us money, but also isn't terrible for the planet. So I think inventing these kind of financial structures is so cool. I mean, it has very clear, it has a clear economic incentive, but it also has a clear moral incentive.
Right.
So I love that combination. It's great. And it's exactly going, hey, if you don't manage to deliver on this, you owe me more money. And and that's cool. That's very cool.
I was gonna say, imagine 30 years ago, you said there's going to be an economic product backed by the government that the payout is going to be tied to the performance of regenerative energy solutions. You'd be like, what are you talking about? But this is, it's already happened in Chile. They're borrowing the model from Chile, and now it's going to happen in a very sophisticated, mature, powerful economy, in the UK economy. And if this takes root there, as you mentioned, there's the EU. It's all kind of connected. It has the potential to expand, and it opens up all sorts of other possibilities of how you can tie economic performance and rewards to green initiatives. So I think it's a really cool story. But the coolest story of all, Rez, is this story, and we would be remiss if we didn't shill Unfucking the Planet with Rez. Give us your pitch. What were you involved with? This is pretty cool.
So I met this cool dude at a conference, Swiss guy, who just at some point when I was giving him my impassioned speech about why I think regenerative finance is cool, he said, hey, I do a podcast. Do you just want to talk about whatever you're talking about right now, but on a podcast? And I went oh my God, that sounds like the best deal ever. Let's make that happen. So the podcast just takes someone who is familiar enough about the DeFi to basically know what it's about, and takes them to the point where they understand a pretty huge section of ReFi, of how we're supporting the voluntary carbon market on the blockchain using DeFi.
Cool. And
So if you want to get an introduction of what the voluntary carbon market is and how that interacts with the blockchain, check it out. I think it was pretty cool.
and you will unfuck the planet.
I won't, but like collectively we might.
Oh, there you go. Well, this is the inaugural, This Week in ReFi. I think it went well enough. We expect this to get a little bit more streamlined and better. So stay tuned. If you have anything you'd want to see covered, obviously you can leave a description or a comment in the video. I will also link you to. Actually, no. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to link you to everything we talked about, and I'll link you to the relevant Discords. But maybe we can get a Discord together where fans of ReFi, unaffiliated with any project, can get together and hang out.
Yes.
That might be a cool
ReFi
thing to
fan
do.
club.
ReFi fan club. All right. Hey, as always, remember to ape responsibly, and we'll catch you all on the next one. Peace, dudes and dudettes.
Peace.